I want to tell you something that your parents told you was the truth. They were wrong. Well, your teachers told you this truth. Your boss repeats it every year during your performance review. The motivational posters on the wall of every break room and every factory and every office building in the country are plastered with it. Work hard, hustle, put in the hours, success will come. It sounds noble. It sounds fair. It sounds like the foundation of the American dream. But I have spent over 70 years studying the real mathematics of wealth. I have read thousands of annual reports. I have sat across the table from hundreds of the richest and most powerful people in the history of commerce. And I can tell you with the cold clarity of a man who no longer has anything to prove to anyone that the work hard story is the most expensive lie ever told to the working class. It is not a conspiracy. Nobody sat in a dark room and designed it to keep you poor. It is something far more sinister than a conspiracy. It is a system, and systems do not need intent. They just need math. Today we are going to do something uncomfortable. We are going to take that story, the one you have built your entire identity around, and we are going to hold it up to the light. We are going to examine it the way a geologist examines a rock formation. We are going to look at the hidden layers. We are going to see what is actually beneath the surface, because the surface says effort equals reward. But the hidden layer, the layer nobody talks about at Thanksgiving dinner, says something completely different. The hidden layer says effort is a rental agreement, and you are the one paying rent. I want to be clear about what this video is not. This is not an excuse to stop working. This is not a manifesto of laziness. Hard work is not the villain. The villain is the story around hard work. The villain is the belief that hard work alone is sufficient. The villain is the invisible ceiling above your head that you have been told does not exist, even as you press your palms flat against it every single day. By the end of this video, you will understand 7 specific truths that the system has buried under 60 years of motivational rhetoric. Each truth will feel slightly wrong at first. That discomfort is important. That discomfort is the feeling of a belief being examined that has never been examined before. Stay with it. The physics of wealth are about to become very clear. Let us begin. Hard truth number 1, effort is the input. Ownership is the output. And you have been confusing the two your entire life. But here is a fact that almost nobody talks about. In 2023, the combined wealth of the top 1% of Americans grew by more than the total income earned by the bottom 50%. Combined, all of them in an entire year. Now ask yourself this question. Did the top 1% work harder than the bottom 50%? Of course not. The people working the hardest in this country are the ones pouring concrete in July heat. They are the nurses working double shifts. They are the warehouse workers scanning barcodes for 10 hours straight. They are the truck drivers spending nights away from their families. These are some of the hardest working human beings on earth, and they are not building wealth. This tells you something important, something the work hard story desperately does not want you to understand. Effort and wealth are not correlated in the way you were told. Let me explain why using a simple economic concept. There are 2 fundamental roles in every economy. There are the people who own the machine, and there are the people who operate the machine. The owners receive the output of the machine. The operators receive a wage for their time. Now, what happens when the machine becomes more productive? When it works faster, more efficiently, when technology improves it? The output goes up, but whose income goes up? The owners. The operator's wage stays roughly the same, maybe a small raise, maybe a cost of living adjustment that barely keeps pace with inflation. The owner, who perhaps worked very hard to build or acquire that machine in the first place, now works less, not more, as productivity increases. The machine does more. The owner does less. The income grows. The operator, who may work harder than ever, sees almost none of the productivity gain. This is not an accident. This is the fundamental architecture of capitalism. And here is what the work hard story conveniently forgets to tell you. Effort is the currency of operators. Capital is the currency of owners. And these 2 currencies do not trade at equal value. They never have. They are not designed to. When you were told to work hard, what you were actually being told was this: be a good operator, be reliable, be present, give the machine your time. You were not being told to become an owner. You were not being told that owning the machine, even a small piece of a machine, is how wealth is actually built. I have owned pieces of companies for most of my adult life. Right now, while you are reading this, while you are at work, while you are sleeping, companies I own pieces of are making money. Coca-Cola is selling cans. Geico is collecting premiums. Apple is selling phones. I am not there. I am not working. My effort is not involved, but my capital is. That is the difference. That is the thing nobody tells you when you are 12 years old and your father says, just work hard, son, and you will be fine. He was not lying. He believed it. He was told the same thing, but he was wrong. And the sooner you understand this distinction, operator versus owner, effort versus capital, the sooner you can begin to actually do something about your financial trajectory. The first hard truth is this: effort is a floor, not a ceiling. It is the minimum requirement to stay in the game. But effort alone will never take you to the top, because the top is reserved for those who understand that capital, not labor, is the engine of wealth. Hard truth number two: the tax code is not a set of rules. It is a map, and it tells you exactly where the system wants your money to go. So people talk about taxes the way they talk about the weather, as if they are random, as if they simply happen to you. They are not random. The tax code is the most honest document in any government's possession, because it does not say what politicians say. It says what the system actually values. And if you read it carefully, the way I have, the way Charlie Munger has, the way every person who has achieved serious financial independence has, it says one thing with almost perfect clarity: the system rewards ownership. The system punishes labor. Let me give you the numbers so there is no ambiguity. If you go to work and earn a salary, you pay income tax. In the United States, depending on your bracket, that can be anywhere from 10 to 37% of every dollar you earn. On top of that, you pay payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, another 7.65%. If you are self-employed, you pay both sides of that. Before you touch a single dollar, 15, 20, 30% is already gone. Now look at how I make my money. My primary income comes from capital gains and dividends. The long-term capital gains tax rate for most Americans is 15%, sometimes 20% at the highest levels. And qualified dividends are taxed at the same preferential rate. I famously noted years ago that my secretary paid a higher effective tax rate than I did. People were outraged when I said this. They should not have been outraged at me. They should have been outraged at the code itself, because that code was not written by accident. It was written quite deliberately, quite intentionally, to incentivize a specific behavior. The behavior is this: stop renting your time and start deploying capital. The government is telling you through the tax code in language that could not be clearer: if you keep selling your labor, we will take more of it. If you start owning assets, we will take less. It is not even subtle. Now, some people hear this and they become angry at the wealthy. I understand that, but anger at the wealthy is not a financial strategy. Understanding the structure is a financial strategy, because here is the thing: the tax code is not a secret. It is public. Any person in any library in any town in this country can read it. The question is whether you understand what it is telling you. It is telling you to change your behavior. It is telling you that every dollar you put into a productive asset, a business, a stock, a piece of real estate, is a dollar that the system will treat more generously than a dollar you earned by showing up somewhere. This is not a moral argument. I am not telling you whether this is right or wrong. I am telling you it is real. I am telling you that the rules of the game are written on the wall, and most people are so busy playing that they have never stopped to read them. The second hard truth is this: the tax code is the clearest evidence that the work hard story is incomplete. The system does not equally reward work and ownership. It actively, legally, permanently tilts the scales. You can either ignore that tilt and keep struggling uphill, or you can understand it and start using it. The map is right there. You just have to look at it. Hard truth number three: inflation is not an economic event. For the working class, it is a slow execution. Let me tell you about the most sophisticated trap in the history of economics. It does not look like a trap. It looks like prices going up. We call it inflation. Most people understand inflation at a surface level. Things get more expensive. The loaf of bread that cost $1 now costs $1.50. You know this. You feel this at the grocery store. What most people do not understand, what the work hard story has no framework for, is the asymmetric way inflation travels through an economy. Here is what actually happens when inflation arrives. First, asset prices go up. The stock market rises. Real estate values increase. The portfolio of a person who owns assets, who owns pieces of companies, who owns property, expands in nominal value almost immediately. The inflation is for them a windfall. Their net worth grows. Then consumer prices go up. Bread, gas, rent, utilities. The cost of living rises. This hits the working class first and hardest because a larger percentage of their income goes directly to these expenses. And last, significantly last, wages go up. Economists call wages sticky. This is a polite academic term for something quite brutal. Your employer does not wake up on the morning inflation spikes and immediately increase your salary. He waits. He waits to see if inflation is persistent. He waits to see what his competitors are doing. He waits for the labor market to force his hand. By the time your wages catch up, if they catch up, the damage is already done. In the last major inflationary period in the United States, real wages adjusted for inflation fell for 24 consecutive months. People were working the same hours. In many cases, they were working harder, and they were getting poorer. This is the treadmill. This is the running in place that looks like progress because your paycheck has a bigger number on it, but buys you less than the previous one. Now let us look at the other side of the ledger. A person who owns assets during inflation is not running on a treadmill. They are on an escalator. Their asset values rise automatically. They do not have to negotiate for a raise. They do not have to prove themselves to a supervisor. Their portfolio is repriced by the market continuously, and it is repriced upward. Warren Buffett owned Coca-Cola during every inflationary period of the last 40 years. When inflation pushed the price of a can of Coca-Cola up, Coca-Cola's revenue went up. Their profit margins, already strong, became stronger. Their stock price rose. The value of my ownership stake rose. I did not work harder to make that happen. Inflation did it for me. This is the profound difference between the world of the operator and the world of the owner. For the operator, inflation is a tax. For the owner, inflation is often a dividend. The work hard story has no answer to inflation. It cannot protect you from it because no amount of effort changes the fundamental math. If you earn income from labor, inflation erodes that income in real terms, and your wages lag behind. If you earn income from capital, inflation often increases the value of your assets. The third hard truth is this: inflation is not neutral. It is a wealth transfer mechanism. And the direction of the transfer is always the same. It flows from the people who own time to the people who own things. Until you own things, you are on the wrong side of that flow. No amount of working harder changes which side you are on. Hard truth number 4, your brain was physically rewired by financial stress to make long-term thinking nearly impossible. And the system benefits from that rewiring. Now we have to talk about biology, because the work hard story assumes a level playing field. It assumes that if you just apply yourself, if you just make better decisions, if you just think long term, you will get ahead. But what if the stress of financial scarcity physically damages your ability to think long term? What if the trap is not just economic? What if it is neurological? Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, researchers at Harvard and Princeton, spent years studying the cognitive effects of financial scarcity. What they found was not subtle. When a person is under significant financial stress, when they are worried about making rent, paying for a car repair, covering a medical bill, their effective cognitive capacity drops miserably. That is a substantial, measurable decline in the brain's executive function. The part of your brain responsible for planning, impulse control, and long-term reasoning is compromised not by stupidity, not by laziness, but by stress. And here is the cruel mathematics of this discovery. The people who most need to make good long-term financial decisions are the people under the most financial stress. They are the exact people whose ability to make those decisions has been diminished. The poor person is trying to solve a complex long-term problem. How do I build financial security with a brain that is stuck in survival mode? A brain that has been hijacked by the immediate. A brain that is asking right now, not in 10 years, but right now, how do I cover this week? This is not weakness, this is neuroscience. And the system, whether intentionally or simply through the mechanics of how capitalism functions, is designed in a way that keeps a significant percentage of the working population in this exact state, just financially stressed enough that long-term planning is cognitively difficult, just financially fragile enough that one emergency derails everything. I have talked about the buffer. I have talked about the first $20,000, about building a wall between yourself and the emergencies. This is why that buffer matters so much more than most people understand. The buffer is not just a financial tool. It is a cognitive one. When you have a buffer, the car breaking down does not spike your cortisol. Your brain does not enter emergency mode. You can look up from the immediate crisis and see the horizon. Without the buffer, you are a person trying to navigate with a map in one hand and a fire in the other. Now think about this from the perspective of the lending industry. The payday loan companies, the credit card companies charging 22% interest, the buy now, pay later services, the rent-to-own stores that charge 300% effective annual interest on televisions. Who do these businesses target? The people under the most financial stress, the people with the least cognitive bandwidth for reading the fine print, the people who are just trying to survive this week. The work hard story has nothing to say about this. It just says work harder, make better choices, stop being irresponsible. But you cannot tell a person whose prefrontal cortex is suppressed by cortisol to simply make better choices. That is like telling a person whose arm is broken to just grip the rope harder. The fourth hard truth is this: poverty is not just a financial condition, it is a neurological one. The stress of scarcity literally impairs the thinking required to escape scarcity. Understanding this is not an excuse. It is a diagnosis, and a diagnosis is the first step toward a cure. The cure begins when you build a buffer, however small, however slowly, that begins to release the grip of that stress on your brain. Hard truth. Number 5. The people who told you to work hard were operators giving advice designed for operators. They were not owners. They did not know what owners know. I want you to think about the people who gave you financial advice growing up. Your parents, most likely, perhaps a teacher, perhaps a counselor at school. These are people who loved you. They wanted the best for you. I have no doubt about that. But I want to ask a different question. Not whether they cared about you, but whether they had access to the information required to give you accurate financial guidance. Think about your father or your mother or both. Did they own a business? Not a side hustle, a real business, one that generated income when they were not there. Did they own a significant investment portfolio? Stocks, bonds, real estate that appreciated over decades. Did they understand the compounding mathematics of capital deployment? Did they know what a PE ratio was, or how to read a balance sheet, or what a competitive moat looks like from the outside? For the vast majority of people watching this, the honest answer is no. Your parents were operators, hardworking, well-meaning, loving operators. They understood the world of labor because they lived in the world of labor, and the advice they gave you was the best advice for navigating the world of labor. Work hard, show up on time, be reliable, earn a good reputation, get a steady job with benefits. This is excellent advice if your goal is to be a valued operator. It is almost completely useless if your goal is to achieve financial independence. Not because it is bad advice, but because it is advice for a different game. The operator's game and the owner's game are not the same game. They have different rules, different time horizons, different risk profiles, and completely different end states. The operator's game has a ceiling. There is a maximum amount of money you can earn by selling your time, no matter how skilled, no matter how experienced, no matter how exceptional. Because time is finite, and you are human, and at some point the machine stops, whether through illness, through age, through economic disruption. And when the machine stops, the income stops. The owner's game has no ceiling, because the assets compound, because the system rewards capital with more capital. Because a well-chosen investment can grow for decades without your involvement, without your labor, without your presence. The people who raised you were not lying to you. They were telling you the truth as they knew it. But they were drawing the map from their own territory, and their territory was the operator's world. If you want to navigate the owner's world, you need a different map. That map is built from studying the people who live in it, not by watching their social media accounts, not by reading celebrity profiles, but by reading their letters to shareholders, by reading their biographies, by reading their actual investment philosophy, by understanding not what they own, but how they think. Charlie Munger said something I have carried with me for 50 years. He said the key is to figure out the mental models, the frameworks of thinking that actually work in the real world, not the frameworks that sound inspiring, not the frameworks that make you feel validated, the ones that are true. And the true framework about hard work is this: it is necessary but not sufficient. It is the cost of admission, not the ticket to the destination. The fifth hard truth is this: the advice you received was designed for the world your advisors lived in. That world has a ceiling. If you want to reach a different destination, you need directions from someone who has been there. Your parents gave you everything they had, but they could not give you a map they did not possess. Hard truth number 6. Busyness is the anesthetic of the ambitious. It feels like progress. It produces none. Folks, let me describe a person. He wakes up at 5 in the morning. He checks his email before his feet hit the floor. He drives to work listening to a podcast about productivity. He works through lunch. He stays late. He misses his daughter's school play. He takes calls on the weekend. He is, by every conventional measure, a hard worker. Code. He is 43 years old. He has almost no savings. He has no investments. He has a retirement account he does not understand and rarely checks. He is, in the financial sense, nowhere, and he cannot understand why. He worked so hard. Here is what happened. He confused motion for progress. He confused busyness for strategy. He confused the feeling of working hard for the results that hard work is supposed to produce. There is a disease I see in the working class and in many parts of the middle class that I call the busyness addiction. It is the compulsion to fill every hour with activity, to never sit still, to always have a to-do list, an inbox, a project, to feel productive through constant motion. This disease is fed by culture. Our culture worships the busy person. When you ask someone how they are doing and they say, "I have been absolutely swamped," there is a note of pride in their voice. The implication is that their busyness is evidence of their importance, that their exhaustion is a trophy. In my world, busyness is not a trophy. It is a warning sign. If you look at the way Charlie Munger and I have spent our professional lives, it looks almost offensive to people with the busyness addiction. We read, we think, we do very little. We make a small number of decisions spaced sometimes years apart with extreme deliberateness. If you looked at my calendar on any given Tuesday, you would see something that looks like the schedule of a retired man. Long stretches of unscheduled time. Time to read, time to think, time to do what appears from the outside to be nothing. But that apparent nothing is everything. Because while I am sitting in my office reading an annual report, I am building the mental model of a business. I am testing an idea against reality. I am slowly, invisibly developing the understanding that will allow me 3 years from now to recognize an extraordinary opportunity when it appears and to act on it with confidence. The busy man who never has time to think is always reacting. He is always operating in the short term because the short term is always on fire. He cannot see 3 years from now because he cannot see past Thursday. He is not building anything. He is maintaining things. And maintaining things, however hard the work of maintenance is, does not produce wealth. Building things produces wealth, but you cannot build while you are in maintenance mode. There is a concept in physics called activation energy. It is the minimum energy required to start a chemical reaction. Below that threshold, you can put in tremendous amounts of effort and nothing happens. The reaction does not start. Thinking is the activation energy of wealth, and thinking requires stillness. It requires silence. It requires the willingness to appear unproductive, to sit with a question without immediately filling the silence with action. The hard workers who never get ahead are almost always people who have confused the activity of work with the output of work. They measure their effort in hours. They count their sacrifice in missed evenings and skipped vacations, but they have never stopped to ask the fundamental question, is this effort aimed at the right target? An archer who fires 100 arrows a day but fires them in every direction is less effective than an archer who fires 3 arrows a year at precisely the right target. The sixth hard truth is this: busyness is not strategy. It is a substitute for strategy. The willingness to stay busy is often the willingness to avoid the harder, quieter work of thinking, of asking whether what you are doing is actually aimed at where you want to go. The most productive thing you will do this week may not be another item crossed off a to-do list. It may be sitting in a chair for 2 hours with no phone and asking yourself, what am I actually building? Hard truth number 7, the compound interest you were taught about works on money, but the compound interest nobody taught you about works on time. And it has already started working against you. But we arrive at the final truth. And this is, in many ways, the heaviest one. Most people have heard of compound interest. Einstein's famous quote, "Eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who does not pays it." People nod. They agree. They think they understand it. They do not, because they think of compound interest as a financial concept, something that happens to money. Interest that earns interest, that earns interest. But compound interest is not just a financial concept. It is a physical law, and it works with terrifying precision on time. Let me show you what I mean. If you are 30 years old today and you invest $10,000 in a broad market index fund and let it compound at 7% annually and you never touch it, by the time you are 65, you will have approximately $106,000. That is the power of compound interest over 35 years. Now imagine you waited until you were 40 to do the same thing. Same $10,000, same 7%, but only 25 years instead of 35. You would have approximately $54,000. You waited 10 years and you ended up with half the money. Those 10 years were not worth 10% of the result. They were worth 50%. This is the exponential nature of time and the compounding equation. The early years are worth vastly more than the late years. Not because the money grows faster in the early years, it does not, but because the early years are the ones that eventually compound into the later years. They are the foundation on which everything else is built. Every year you delay understanding this. Every year you spend in the work harder paradigm, trading time for money and spending what you earn, is a year of compounding that you will never recover. Not partially recover, never recover. This is not meant to demoralize you. It is meant to create urgency where the work hard story has created complacency, because the work hard story has an implicit assumption built into it. The assumption is that there is always more time. Work hard now, save later. Hustle this decade, invest in the next one. The story positions financial independence as something that is always one more promotion away, one more raise away, one more good year away. But compound interest does not wait for you to be ready. It starts working the moment you deploy capital, and every moment you delay that deployment is a moment the machine is not running. There is another dimension to this that almost nobody discusses. The compound interest of time works in both directions. If you are on the asset side of the equation, if you own things, time works for you. Every day that passes, your assets are compounding. Your snowball is rolling. The hill is doing the work. If you are on the liability side, if you carry debt, particularly high-interest consumer debt, time works against you with the same ruthless precision. Every day that passes, the balance grows. The interest compounds. The hole deepens. A person with $10,000 in credit card debt at 22% annual interest who makes only minimum payments will pay back over $30,000 by the time the debt is retired. They paid $20,000, 2 times the original amount, for the privilege of borrowing for a few years. This is compound interest working against you. And the work hard story is almost entirely silent on this. It does not tell you that the system is designed to extract compound interest from the people who do not understand it and deliver compound interest to the people who do. It just tells you to work hard. The seventh hard truth is this: time is not neutral in the game of wealth. It is the most powerful variable in the entire equation. And it has a direction. Every single day, you are either compounding toward financial freedom or compounding toward financial bondage. There is no standing still. There is no neutral gear. The machine runs whether you engage it or not. The only question is which side of the machine you are on. The way out, what you do with 7 hard truths. Now we have to do something important, because a list of problems without a framework for action is not wisdom. It is just discouragement dressed up as philosophy. I did not come here to demoralize you. I came here because I believe that understanding the real rules of the game, even when those rules are unfair, even when they reveal that you have been playing the wrong game, is the only path to playing a better game. So let us synthesize what we have learned into something actionable. The first truth tells you that ownership is the mechanism, not more hours, not a better job title. The first move before anything else is to begin the process of owning something. Even a single share of a broad market index fund, even a fractional ownership stake in an asset you understand. The shift from operator to owner does not happen overnight, but it begins with a decision. It begins with redirecting even a small amount of capital away from consumption and toward ownership. The second truth tells you to study the tax code not as a burden but as a map. Understand which income the system taxes heavily and which it treats gently. Begin to orient your financial life toward the behaviors the system actually rewards. This takes time, it takes education, but the education is available to anyone willing to read. The third truth tells you that inflation is not something that happens to you. It is a force that flows in a direction. Begin to position yourself on the correct side of that flow. Own assets that reprice with inflation. Stop holding large amounts of idle cash that erode in real terms. The fourth truth tells you that the buffer is not optional. It is the prerequisite for everything else. Building a financial cushion, even a small one, is not about savings for the sake of savings. It is about buying back your cognitive function. It is about releasing the grip of scarcity stress on your prefrontal cortex so that you can think clearly enough to make the decisions that change your trajectory. The fifth truth tells you to be deliberate about whose advice you take and whose map you study, not because your parents were wrong to love you, but because they could not give you knowledge they did not have. Seek out people who have navigated the owner's world, not to copy their specific decisions, but to understand the mental models that made those decisions possible. The sixth truth tells you to stop. Quite literally, stop the constant motion. Find space in your week, real space, not the space between tasks, but actual unstructured thinking time, and use it to ask the fundamental strategic question, what am I actually building? Every month of misdirected effort is a month that could have been spent on the right target. The sooner you find the right target, the sooner the effort begins to accumulate. The seventh truth tells you that time is already running. It has been running since you were born. Every day you delay deploying capital, even small amounts, even imperfect investments, is a day of compounding that is permanently lost. This is not a reason for panic. Panic leads to bad decisions. This is a reason for the quiet, steady urgency of a person who finally understands what the clock actually measures. The obituary of the hard worker. I want to leave you with an image. Imagine a man. He worked hard his entire life. He got up every morning before the alarm. He was never late. He never called in sick. He worked for the same company for 32 years. He did everything the story said to do. When he retired at 65, he had a modest pension, enough to survive, not enough to be free. Well, he spent the last 20 years of his life being careful with money, watching what he spent, worrying quietly about outliving his savings. At his funeral, people said wonderful things about him. They said he was reliable. They said he was hardworking. They said he never complained. They did not say he was free, because he never was. Now imagine a different man. He was not necessarily smarter. He was not from a richer family. He did not get any breaks. The first man did not get. But somewhere in a library, in a book, in a conversation that changed the direction of his thinking, he learned the difference between effort and capital. He learned which side of the compound interest equation he needed to be on. He learned that the work hard story was the beginning, not the end of a complete financial education. He kept working. He worked hard, but he redirected a portion of what he earned, even when it was small, even when it was painful, toward assets, toward ownership, toward the slow, quiet, invisible accumulation of capital that eventually began to work for him instead of against him. He made mistakes. Compounding is not linear. There were setbacks, but he did not stop. And he did not stop because he understood the math. He understood that the snowball, once it starts rolling, does not need to be perfect. It just needs to keep moving. At his funeral, people also said he was hardworking. They also said he was reliable. But they also said something else. They said he was generous. They said he was present. They said he was calm in ways that other people were not calm. They said there was a kind of unhurried dignity about him that they had always admired but never quite understood. They did not understand it because they did not know what they were seeing. What they were seeing was a man who had stopped running on the treadmill, a man who had at some point understood the game well enough to step off. Not because he stopped working, but because he had worked in the right direction long enough that the machine had begun to carry him. That is not luck. That is physics. 7 hard truths. The effort lie. The tax map. The inflation transfer. The neurological trap. The operator's map. The busyness anesthetic. The compound clock. These are not comfortable truths. I know that. Comfortable truths do not change anything. They just make you feel better about staying where you are. The purpose of a hard truth is not to hurt you. The purpose of a hard truth is to reorient you, to turn the compass, to show you that the direction you have been walking, however earnest and however exhausting, is not the direction of the destination. You still have to walk. Nobody is carrying you. But now you know which way to face. The work is not over. In fact, in some ways, it is just beginning. But it is different work now. It is deliberate work. It is oriented work. It is the work of a person who understands the rules of the game well enough to play it on purpose. That is what I want for you. Not a shortcut, not a fantasy, just the truth. Go use it. That is all. Thank you for watching.